The EU Migration Pact will come into effect as soon as next year. According to this pact, each EU country, including Poland, will either accept migrants or pay exorbitant fees for each one rejected, over 20,000 euros. The incumbent German chancellor, during an election debate, boasted of his successes when it comes to getting rid of illegal immigrants. He reported that he had called all heads of state and government in Germany's neighbors, including Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk, and told them that they had to accept being sent illegal migrants, quote, because it is possible under European law. Early parliamentary elections in Germany are taking place in less than 2 weeks. We've seen the first debate of the candidates for chancellor, where the current incumbent Olaf Scholz of the SPD faced CDU candidate Friedrich Merz. During the clash, the incumbent chancellor boasted of his successes when it came to getting rid of the problem of illegal immigrants. The rejections are perfectly legal because they involve cases where there are no asylum applications. And I made this possible by calling the heads of state and government of Germany's neighbors and saying, we are doing this now and you must accept it, because it is possible under European law. In other words, Scholz also called Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk and informed him that Poland must accept the return of illegal immigrants via Germany to Polish territory, all as part of the transition period until the Migration Pact comes into force next year. However, the Polish Prime Minister has assured his constituents otherwise.
Polska będzie beneficjentem.
Poland will be a beneficiary of the Migration Pact. We will not pay for anything. We will not have to accept any migrants from other directions. The EU will not impose any migrant quotas on us. However, EU migration officials in Europe are telling a different story. Under European Union law, there is no legal way to exempt Poland from implementing any parts of the pact. In a few months, we will hear that we will either have to accept hundreds of thousands of migrants or we will have to pay for it. In this situation, these mythical EU COVID recovery funds that Tusk claimed he'd bring in won't flow into Poland because the EU will deduct a penalty for not accepting migrants. It was the Tusk government that agreed to the document, along with the governments of Denmark and Cyprus, where they assure that they will speed up work on the implementation of the Migration Pact. Germany says plainly that the pact will be in their interest. The most important thing is that we can send back even more people within the framework of European law, and this legislation will come into force next year in Europe, throughout the European Union. It seems that Tusk may have wanted to preempt what Scholz would say about the Migration Pact. Do not be surprised if, once in a while from some EU capital, you will hear announcements that do not quite correspond to reality, because, for example, their election campaign requires such a tough position on migration. Please do not worry about it, and rely on our announcements as to the situation in Poland on the issue of migration. It is us who will make the decisions here in Warsaw, and no one else, anywhere else. We are very committed to a new migration policy. First of all, solidary distribution of migrants within the European Union. Germany will benefit greatly from this. There is no indication that Poland will be excluded. Who are the Polish people to believe? The Germans with official documents on their side? I, in talks with my European partners, exclude this type of scenario where Poland has to do something because the Migration Pact says it does. Or Tusk, infamous for being a serial flip-flopper, particularly on the topic of migration. It was Tusk, as head of the European Council, who threatened the Polish government of the time with penalties for not taking in illegal migrants. This will involve certain consequences. These are the rules in Europe. The Polish government is agreeing to pay for Germany's mistakes. The Polish public is to pay for the fact that the Germans allowed illegal immigrants into their country on a large scale, and today want to get rid of them. Because this current Polish government is basically a government that carries out instructions from abroad. The Polish authorities should talk to the German authorities, first of all, putting a clear expectation on them to stop sending immigrants from Germany to Poland. Otherwise, we would introduce border controls and simply enforce them. That's what the conversation between Tusk and Scholz should have looked like. Unfortunately, everything points to the opposite, that it was the German chancellor who presented his expectations to be implemented by the Polish authorities. This is supported by official data. Germany has transferred many thousands of illegal migrants to Polish territory during the transition period before the enactment of the Migration Pact by introducing border controls on the Polish border. At this point, Germany has terminated the Schengen Codex with all their neighbors, and they're applying what they have already been applying in Poland for over a year, because border controls on the Polish-German border were introduced in October 2023, and I estimate the numbers for 2024 at about 9,000 people. My information came in the first half of last year, mainly from the German Federal Police themselves. The Polish government has done virtually nothing about the procedure. Instead, it is investing, for example, in border guards to handle illegal migrants, and nearly 50 integration centers for foreigners. In all likelihood, Poland will either take in illegal immigrants or pay horrendous sums of money to reject them. Why shouldn't asylum seekers go to Viktor Orban? Why can't the Hungarians, the Czechs, the Poles, or the Slovaks take in the migrants who are with us? Poland will do its part. Slovakia will do its part. According to the words of Olaf Scholz, Poland is already doing its part.
These are not tears of happiness, they are tears of despair. Eli Schreiber survived 491 days in Hamas captivity. The only thing keeping him alive was the thought that he would return to his beloved wife and 2 teenage daughters. Only following his release did he learn that his family was brutally murdered by Palestinian terrorists on the same day he was kidnapped, 7th of October 2023.
We sat and bawled our eyes out, we really did. I was sitting there cuddling Leanne's teddy bear, and I think I made him wet, actually. But yeah, it reminded us of what we'd lost and what it's going to be like for Ellie.
Yeah.
If and when he finds out.
I mean, if Ellie
Can't imagine.
The terrorists also kidnapped and murdered his brother. Eli's wife and daughters were killed by the barbarians in the hallway of their own home, into which the assassins forced their way.
Yeah, we don't know whether Ellie had been taken out of the house hostage before they shot the 3 girls, but it obviously happened very, very quickly, because they had just come out of the safe room, and they were outside the safe room when they were mowed down, and the 3 of them were laid on the floor together.
Each story of a freed hostage is a different kind of tragedy. 34-year-old Or Levy returned home, but it's not the same place anymore. His wife was killed by Hamas militant. Only their son was left alive, who happened to be cared for by his grandparents. Little Almog has not seen his father for half of his life. He was just over a year and a half old when terrorists kidnapped his father and killed his mother. Now he has turned 3. The pain is tearing him apart. During his captivity, he was very afraid that something bad might have happened to his family. Now he has heard the tragic news. He did not know, had no idea, that Inav, his wife, had been killed. Edith Ohel, the mother of Alan, still imprisoned by Hamas, is waiting for her son to return home. However, she received horrible information about his condition. At the moment, Alon is chained. He can't see out of one eye. He has a wound on his arm and hand. They give him almost nothing to eat. What mother can stand the thought of her child being hurt and hungry? And I've been waiting for him for so long. Palestinian terrorists hold hostages in inhumane conditions. They treat women who are beaten, raped, humiliated, chained to walls, starved, especially ruthlessly. And that's how they've been waiting for freedom for a year and 4 months now.
This is the situation. We weren't surprised. It's something different to see it with your own eyes, but the hostages that were murdered, Eden Yerushalmi and Carmel Gat and Hirsch Goldberg Poland back in the end of August, they were also in a very, very... they lost a lot of kilograms and they were starved as well, so we knew this, and the government knows that this is the situation. It's difficult to see, but I think maybe even more difficult than the starvation is the personal tragedies that each and every one of the hostages that came back today had to deal with, losing wife and not knowing about it, losing your entire family, not knowing about it.
On the 7th of October 2023, Hamas criminals entered Israel, brutally murdering, raping and kidnapping people, including children. For months they failed to get them back. Israel's biggest ally, America, then ruled by Democrats, acted ineffectively. It wasn't until Donald Trump negotiated a ceasefire that the hostages were released.
President Trump is the greatest friend that Israel has ever had in the White House. I think he's not only making a tremendous change in the Israeli-American alliance, strengthening it beyond anything we've seen up to now, but also he's a great leader for America and for the world.
The price of freedom for Israeli hostages is high. For every person, there are about 60 Islamic criminals that Israel has had to release from prisons. But if it were not for this, then these people who went through a real hell would never have come home. Donald Trump has set his sights on decisive policies from day one. The US president's next decisions are not only about national security, but also about stopping leftist ideology. The US Agency for International Development, which financed such projects, is to be abolished. This means closing the money tap for Polish organizations as well. Millions of dollars were designated to flow to the media and NGOs supporting anti-Polish campaigns. America first. The policies that Donald Trump has consistently implemented are reverberating around the world. The US president is putting things in order at the US Agency for International Development. On Sunday, inspectors from the Department of Government Efficiency entered its headquarters. The list of financial abuses is extensive.
And I would just say a strong message to Democrats who are out there pretending to be outraged about the long list of crap that this administration is cutting, federal waste and funding, like $2 million for sex changes in Guatemala, $6 million to fund tourism in Egypt, $20 million on a new Sesame Street show in Iraq, $4.5 million to combat disinformation in Kazakhstan. I could go on, and I'm happy to provide this list to every single one of you.
That's not all, however. The White House report indicates that US taxpayers also funded a transgender opera in Colombia and a transgender-themed comic book in Peru, among other projects. The agency has turned into an ideological money laundry. The Democrats have been pumping money through this agency, carrying out their sick ideological ideas, promoting all sorts of rotten ideas around the world, led, of course, by LGBT. According to MP Jarosław Sachajko, such agency activities are also a way to manipulate the public. This is a communist way of violating democracy because there is no longer democracy. Democracy is when we as citizens have equal access to other citizens and convince each other with rational argument. In 2022 alone, the amount of all subsidies was about $60 billion. By Donald Trump's decision, the money tap has been turned off for at least 90 days. The agency is also set to be shut down, which is the responsibility of Elon Musk, who heads the Department of Government Efficiency. In terms of things related to US aid, I consulted in detail with the president and he agreed that the agency should be shut down. The decision has drawn widespread criticism from international organizations, including Amnesty International. The sudden collapse of US aid will put millions of people at risk. Dismantling US aid will not make anyone safer or increase anyone's well-being. Perhaps, contrary to these words, it will nevertheless contribute to security, among other things, for Poles, because Amnesty International is the author of the advert urging a boycott of the referendum, in which one of the questions concerned illegal immigrants. And winning political disputes was one of the goals of the agency-funded organizations. The money was spent, for example, to influence politics in various countries, to influence the media market in many countries, so that one side of a political dispute wins. That's why the editor-in-chief of Political Criticism, famous for its far-left beliefs, is complaining about Trump's decision. I received an email from an organization with which we work to implement a project to support independent media. The message was entitled Grant Suspension. The meeting with the head of the agency was boasted about on social media by Warsaw's president and candidate to be president of Poland, Rafał Trzaskowski. These were hundreds of millions of dollars. So what does this mean? It means that those who were theoretically in the opposition and complained that Law and Justice had more power, had much more power than Law and Justice. If one side of the public debate is supported, no matter from which foreign country, American, Brussels, German, this is something Poles should know about. The Polish budget for 2025 included includes an additional 70 million zlotys for NGOs. Will the government throw a lifeline to organizations that were funded by USAID? The Minister for Civil Society, it turns out that there is such a person, is said to be looking into the possibilities.
Romanian President Klaus Iohannis announced that he will leave office on Wednesday, February 12th. His term expired on December 21st, but after the second round of the presidential election was cancelled, Iohannis felt he had to keep his post until a successor emerged. Romania's conservative opposition called him a usurper, occupying the office against the law, and the cancellation of the presidential election just before the second round was called a farce. In December, Romanian authorities nullified the presidential election based on accusations of Russian influence spread using the Chinese app TikTok. The reason? A candidate from outside the left-wing elite won. As a result, Klaus Iohannis, whose term expired on December 21st, held on to the presidential seat for 50 more days. He left when the opposition threatened him with impeachment. The first round of the repeated presidential elections is scheduled for May 4th. It is not yet known whether the winner of the November 1st round, Călin Georgescu, will participate. Romania, like Poland, is part of Europe's defense against the threat from the East. This defense is coordinated by the Americans, and it's hard not to link the departure of the European elite-backed Klaus Iohannis with the change in Washington and the new, firm policies of Donald Trump.